Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, and with Snowpiercer finally pumping the brakes on its first season, it's time to talk about the off the rails ending and how things could be getting back on track for next time. Both episodes 9 and 10 drop back to back, and there's a lot to unpack. Throughout this video we'll be going through the ins and outs of each entry, as well as what we took from the ending and what could happen going forward. Obviously there will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check them out yet, then I highly recommend that you check out now. Make sure you drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed the weekly breakdowns, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for videos on your favourite series every week. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this. Now let's get into our ending explained of Snowpiercer. Okay, so episode 9 actually opens up with the POV of Melanie, who's pretty much been an anti-hero throughout the entire show. She says that she subtly tried to tear down the ideas of Wilford, and in their place, prop up a better world that isn't based on his rules. Episode 9 especially seems to be based around the idea that everyone thinks they know best. However, when given the opportunity, they still rely on the old ways and things that have come before, thus they don't break the cycle. Melanie is still basing her ideals off Wilford's, and this is exemplified by the books in her study that she looks to for guidance. There's also Commander Gray and Ruth, who both want things to remain exactly the same, so it was pointless ousting Melanie in the first place. Leighton causes a revolution, but when he gains power, he's pretty much left with a society that resembles the one he was rebelling against. All in all, there's a lot going on, and it does paint Melanie out as a very complex character that definitely feels at her most vulnerable in this episode. We actually see her being kind to the tailies, and I think her being propped in there with them has shown firsthand that she was probably too cruel to them. However, as she says, the train demanded blood, and to me this is pretty much commenting on how society often demands sacrifice and the use of fear in order to stop chaos. Without the notion of punishment, we would all simply do as we pleased, and this is exemplified by the papermaker who's executed in the opening to set an example to others that might consider joining the revolution. The train demanding blood also plays massively into the end of episode 9, in which Leighton is forced to sacrifice his prisoner carriage, and yeah, lots of things going on. Now, these episodes are very much about the uprisings, and though there are certain power plays and moments, on the whole, they're pretty straightforward until probably the last 15 minutes of episode 10. Now, the main metaphor of the entire uprising is how the 1% cannot operate without the other 99, whereas the 99 can probably function without the 1. We see in First Class, which is of course a play on the number 1 itself, that should the workforce be fully killed off, they would be left with nothing, and thus they're put into a tight corner where they have to promise new leadership and that things will change. This is of course often shown in up and coming politicians running for election who make promises to change things, and they either don't deliver or don't fully fulfill things to the extent that they said they would. This only leaves things open to go one way, and that is that the tail will take over and try and prop up a new person in power. However, it doesn't seem like if Leighton's revolution succeeds that he would actually know how to run the economy on the train, and it's definitely a fascinating aspect of the show that I loved watching play out. Leighton is offered the opportunity to hand himself over, and Melanie is rescued by Jinju and Javi, who've seen firsthand how she runs things and know that the train is being built in a certain way which relies on her rules. Though this has reduced the train to the have and have nots, everything is in a precise order for a specific reason. Without this order, everything descends into people trying to survive no matter what, and this is exemplified in Zara, who of course sacrificed Josie and her child for her own life. Now with her, Leighton realises he's a father, and it really puts him into a vulnerable position, but hey, Zara just wanted her man back, and I guess don't hate the player, hate the game. Now, it's upon activating the radio in episode 9 that we get our first tease of how the show will end. A radio signal can be heard, and this sets up the reveal that there's another train which not only has Wilford on board, but also Melanie's daughter. We'll discuss this later in the video, but it's important to bear in mind that in the world of Snowpiercer, there are actually far more trains than we're aware of. Though we don't see them all, the graphic novel states that there could be up to 10 navigating the planet, and these arcs have all been put in place to not only provide humanity with a lifeboat, but also so that Wilford has other retreats should he be ousted, like we saw with Melanie. Now speaking of Melanie, she goes to Leighton and tells him of a way to defeat the army and promises to hand over the power she has so that Leighton can lead. We did kinda have a feeling that Melanie would be kept around due to her being the only one that could fix the train, and I like how she sort of abdicated power after admitting her way didn't work. we have an awesome decoupling scene in which Melanie pulls off a maneuver that separates the train and then pulls it back together with the army released into the world to either starve or freeze. I love how when Leighton hands himself over, they make him hold up a white flag, which of course means surrender. This juxtaposes the red flag, which has been used throughout the series to signal war and of course defiance. The scene in which the train breaks apart is great, and it reminded me of an old mission on Final Fantasy VIII, so I found it thrilling to watch. They pretty much got rid of the dead weight, but unfortunately in order to carry out the plan, Leighton also had to cut off the prisoner car, which, as you can guess, contained a lot of his friends. It's at this point that he made the tough decision, and probably realised firsthand that making sacrifices isn't easy. It's something that Melanie has had to do several times for the greater good, and thus he ends up sending many of his allies to their death. It's a big gut punch that showed the series continued to operate in shades of grey rather than black and white, but I guess we should have seen it coming, with the finale being called 994 cars long. Still though, it's a tough watch. Now, I actually have a feeling that these characters will be back, and that they could have been rescued by Wilford, who, as we learn, is operating out and about. The Folgers of course helped to pay for the train, and Wilford would definitely have use for the people that Leighton cut off. Melanie seemed to sort of manipulate the situation and put it in Leighton's hands, and I think that she may have set this up as an ace up her sleeve to expose him should he ever try to betray her. We know that Melanie likes to hide her true intentions, and she did this with Miles and of course Wilford. Leighton of course wins and ends up becoming the leader, and Lafayette gets his revolution. I love you, Hamilton. Now, he delivers the bad news about Josie to Miles, and I'm actually surprised at how little he cared about what Melanie did. She locked him in a drawer, killed his girlfriend, and yeah, starved his people, but she did kill the Folgers, so yeah, fair enough. Now, Leighton tells the people that they are in control, and they pass through Chicago, which is the city that it all started in. This marks a revolution, aka a sort of New Year celebration of the train going around the globe once more. LJ goes to her cabin and sees that it's been overrun. She was of course instrumental in the revolution and was pretty much the reason that the rebels were even able to gain access to the train. LJ becomes close to Brakeman John, and I think that going forward he will fill the role of her bodyguard, who as we know became a serial killer under her command. She is clearly going to want to take back the power that she's lost, and I think that in the second season she's slowly going to make several plays. However, I can see it having a worse outcome for LJ, as she won't have the Wilford secrets to lord over Melanie and will hopefully finally be sent to her death. Either way, LJ is going to have to face her own demons, as is Melanie, who takes a psychological trip into her biggest regret, which is of course leaving her daughter behind. Now, what's interesting here is that the music that accompanies this is very similar to the mild bursts we hear on the radio. Throughout the season, we've never learned who Melanie's daughter's father was, and I think that this music indicates that it might actually be Wilford, and this explains why he went to get her for his own train. Clearly, Alexandra has been put in a position of power, and it only makes sense that she would be so far up the train if she was connected to Wilford as much as she was Melanie. There's definitely a possibility that Wilford and Melanie were going out at one point and became estranged before working together on completing the train. That's just a theory, but obviously let me know your thoughts below. Now of course we are here to talk about the ending, which confirms that Wilford is indeed alive. So all the draw theories are now mute, and Sean Bean will indeed be portraying the character in the flesh. We learn that Wilford has been aboard Big Alice, which is a supply train that has been racing around the planet. Alice, I believe, is a play on the word alias, which the name derives from, and originally this meant something additional before being used as a meaning for a pseudonym. Wilford clearly kept this train around to basically rebuild Snowpiercer, as it's stacked with parts. I also think that he had it just in case there was a mutiny, and it shows that perhaps Melanie's thoughts on him were misguided and that he had a plan all along. Wilford is clearly back to ruin the revolution and take over the train, and he actually manages to catch up to them, attaches onto the back with one of the coolest clamps I've ever seen, unhinges the door to board, and sends in Melanie's daughter. I love the way that the W flips around to an M, suggesting that this is indeed Wilford's train, but it has been subverted to Melanie's. Now Melanie says that she will not fall in line under his leadership again, but I do believe with him basically doing what she did with Miles and Leighton, that she's pretty much going to have to. We of course cut away before we get to see Wilford, but the final scene leaves a lot of clues to indicate how things could be going. Now, your first question is likely, how did Wilford survive? Well, as we see, Melanie herself dons a suit in the episode that allows her to operate in the wilderness, and I believe that she would have left Wilford with one of these, as she only said that she left him to die, rather than killing him outright. Your second question is probably, well, what will happen to Melanie? Well, due to having this suit and being on the outside, she survives from falling from the train, and with it being stopped, she can likely board Alice from the back and go and face Wilford head on. We close with someone sitting at the back of the train, which is likely the megalomaniac himself, and see Melanie heading towards it, so I do think that the two will meet soon. Your third question, if I'm using my psychic powers correctly, is, does this tie in with the movie? Well, we have kind of been wondering whether the show would be part of the overall continuity or not, and they've done a great job of leaving things open for them to either build their own thing or make it all part of the universe. We don't know for definite, but due to the way that the show ends, I do lean more towards it being part of the greater universe. Wilford definitely has the potential to take over the train, adding the parts that make it more aligned with the film, and yet connect these two worlds together. Now, going forward, in the original graphic novel, we learn that there's another train called Icebreaker that many of the characters end up boarding to escape Snowpiercer due to the spread of a virus that moves its way up the carriages. Probably too soon to be doing something like that, but the second season has mostly been filmed, so it shouldn't be delayed too much. I think in this show, the virus will be replaced with the forces of Wilford, who will initially take over Snowpiercer, and he will bring his own engine aboard, which is something that happens in the original work. The deserters of Snowpiercer may flee to Icebreaker, and they will spend their time trying to avoid colliding with the train, all whilst balancing the economy on board. In the graphic novel, this was due to the population on board Snowpiercer being wiped out by the disease, but I do think they may take things in a slightly different direction, with there basically being a war between the two trains. In the source material, the survivors actually ended up leaving the train at one point and going off into the real world. This was also shown in the film, and the comic book series ends with a small patch of flowers being shown coming out of the thawed ice, suggesting that life has continued outside of the train, much like how the movie hints at. I'm not sure exactly where things will go, but I do believe that the upcoming season will centre around a sort of battle between Melanie and Wilford, potentially with her, or rather their daughter caught in the middle. It's definitely going to make for a gripping show going ahead, and I really can't wait to see what happens when it drops. Now obviously I'd love to hear your thoughts on the show as a whole, and where you think things could be going next time. Make sure you comment below and let me know, and if you enjoyed the video then please drop a thumbs up, and if you missed any of our coverage it's going to be linked after this. If you've been watching along with us week by week, then thank you for all your support towards the channel, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at Heavy Spoilers or click the Discord link in the description below. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with the channel, so hopefully we see you over there, but if not, thanks for watching till the end of the video, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace!